Okay, good morning, sixth graders. It is Wednesday, April 28th, and we are finishing up this packet this week. You actually have two readings in your assignment. We are only going to do one this week. We're going to do the second one that begins on page 64. We're going to skip the first one. And Miss Allen knows this, so it's okay. By the way, I hope everybody is doing well and had a good weekend and ready for finishing this up. All right, so we're going to read this story and answer the questions. Now, the story is historical fiction, which means it's a made-up story, but it was based on facts and history. So, hold on a minute. Okay, sorry about that. I had to get a drink. All right, so we're going to read this and answer the questions. Now, I would not normally read an assessment. This is an assessment, but just due to the circumstances that we're under right now, I decided to use this as a teaching assessment where I will teach you how to do this kind of test, okay? So first, we're going to read this part. It says, in the 1930s, the United States was stuck in a deep economic depression that left millions of people without jobs. That's not unlike what's going on today with the coronavirus situation. A lot of people have lost their jobs due to that. In part of the Great Plains, an environmental disaster known as the Dust Bowl added to the hard times. A long drought, combined with years of poor farming practices, made the land vulnerable to extreme wind erosion. Farmers watched helplessly as the topsoil that had once nourished their crops blew away. In this fictional selection, a boy and his family struggle with the hardships of the Dust Bowl. All right, so the reason we see for the Dust Bowl was it was a long drought. Okay, that means a long period without rain. And then there had been years of poor farming practices that caused the land to become easily eroded. Okay, so let's read on. All right, paragraph 1. As Edwin rested his cheek against the side of his cow, Nellie, he could hear the wind whistling through the barn walls and see the air begin to darken with dust. Annie and Jewel were giggling as they played in the hayloft above him, when one of the girls began to wheeze. Edwin quickly finished milking the cow and called to his sisters. Hurry up, girls, he said. Another black blizzard is coming. The wind suddenly picked up strength, and before Edwin's eyes, the farmhouse, only 50 feet away, became nearly invisible. Without hesitation, Edwin grabbed 2 pieces of heavy twine, tied one around each girl's waist, and then tied the 2 girls together. He took Annie's hand and instructed her to hold tightly to Jewel. Leaning into the blinding wind, Edwin slowly navigated them back to the house. All right, so this is very, very strong, dusty wind. Okay, so let me pause this and we'll move the page up. All right, inside, Ma was relieved to see the children. With a sigh, she took the milk from Edwin, eyeing the familiar dust that she would try to skim off before serving the milk to her family. Although it was early morning, the dust storm outside made the small farmhouse dark and dismal. Edwin slapped the dirt from his jacket with his hands. He was weary of the dust, too, but he was smiling inside because tomorrow his father was coming home. All right, so picture this. He had gone out to milk the cows and had milk to bring in, but the dust had created a film over the top, and Mom had to take that off, of course, before serving the milk. All right, the next morning dawned clear and calm. Edwin swept the house while his mother worked in the yard, rescuing her daffodils from the dust that had drifted against the foundation of the house like gritty snow. The clatter of a rundown automobile heralded the arrival of Edwin's father, and the boy raced outside. The family gathered around Pa, who hugged each one of them tightly. He had been in Arizona for 3 weeks picking cotton. This spring the ground was hard and barren, and the constant dust storms made it impossible to cultivate crops. So cultivate means grow. Pa had to find some way to earn money. His children were wearing tattered hand-me-downs, and his small herd of cattle was slowly starving. One thing I should have mentioned, guys, you should be following along with me. And so you can see the words as I read them. When Ma asked about the work, Pa said, oh wait, let me reread that. We're on 6. When Ma asked about the work, Pa said that the wages he earned were far less than what had been promised. Still, he'd brought home enough money to see them through another month. Eventually, the joy of being reunited with his family faded, and the careworn expression returned to Pa's face. So he is under a lot of stress and a lot of worry for his family. After Pa had been home a few days, Edwin overheard his parents having a serious discussion. "I just don't know if I can leave our home," Ma said, a note of grief in her voice. Pa had heard there was work on commercial farms in California where cotton, oranges, and other crops grew nearly year-round. "I know it's not like owning our own farm, but what choice do we have?" Pa pleaded. Afterward, Ma went into the yard and stood for a long time by her beloved lilac bush, staring out at the desolate fields. So desolate would mean empty fields. No crops are growing right now. Later, Pa asked Edwin to ride the horse into town to purchase provisions. Edwin rode at a slow pace, thinking. He didn't like it when his parents argued, and he didn't like it when his father had to leave home to work. Most of all, Edwin wished there was something he could do to assist his family. At the store, he walked past the half-empty shelves to the back counter and asked Mr. Harburger for beans and flour. As Edwin waited, something bright and orange caught his eye. It was an old advertisement on the shelf in front of him, a photograph of a glistening orange grove with the words "Sunny California" splashed across the top. Edwin had never seen an orange grove before. Studying the picture, Edwin's face brightened. "Take it," Mr. Harburger said with a wink. At home, Edwin tacked the picture up next to his bed. One day, Edwin even caught his mother examining the photograph of the orange grove, smiling for the first time in a long time. So as we read, guys, try to picture and visualize what's happening. So for an orange grove, you would just picture a big farm of trees of oranges. Okay, so keep those kinds of visuals in your mind as we read. All right, number 11. When autumn arrived, Edwin's parents learned the government was offering to buy starving livestock for slaughter. Most farmers knew their animals could not survive another winter, so they accepted the offer in exchange for some much-needed cash. After a long discussion, Edwin's parents did the same. Edwin sensed a change was coming. The cow Nellie remained, but Edwin could see that she was becoming desperately thin. The next day, Edwin sold Nellie at the Bailey's farm. The Baileys were doing better than most folks, though Edwin couldn't say why. He returned home with $16 in his pocket and a little relief knowing that Nellie would be cared for. Later that evening, Edwin's parents made an important announcement. They would be packing whatever would fit into their old automobile and moving to California. Then Edwin made his own Then Edwin made his own announcement. "Here," he said, handing his father the $16, "we can buy fuel with this." All right, let's look at this first sentence. I'm going to read it, and then you circle the correct, or what you think is the correct answer. Read this sentence. Edwin wants to help his family during this difficult time. Which of the following sentences from the story best supports this statement? Okay, A. After Pa had been home a few days, Edwin overheard his parents having a serious discussion. B. Later, Pa asked Edwin to ride the horse into town to purchase provisions. Purchase means to buy, so he bought things that they needed in the home. C. At home, Edwin tacked the picture up next to his bed, so he taped it or pinned it up on the wall. And D, the next day, Edwin sold Nellie at the Bailey's farm. All right, so which one of those tells you that Edwin wants to help his family during this very difficult time? All right, go ahead and mark your answer. And then we will go on to number 2. All right. Okay, let me scroll down here. Okay. All right, number 2. Which statement best supports the idea that the Dust Bowl made it difficult for families to survive? A. With a sigh, she took the milk from Edwin, eyeing the familiar dust that she would try to skim off before serving the milk to her family. B. Although it was early morning, the dust storm outside made the small farmhouse dark and dismal. C. He was weary of the dust too, but he was smiling inside because tomorrow his father was coming home. And D. Edwin swept the house while his mother worked in the yard, rescuing their daffodils from the dust that had drifted across the foundation of the house like gritty snow. All right, so you're looking for the sentence that best supports that the Dust Bowl made it difficult for families to survive. Okay, so think about that. In order to survive, they need to be able to eat and drink. And when he went out to milk the cow and came back in, what did Mom have to do because there was something on the milk? I gave you a big hint there on that one. All right. Number 3. Which statement best expresses the theme of this story? Okay, so remember, the theme is the message that's in the story. So A, don't rely on others for help. B, you can't make a person change. C, try to find the good in every situation. D, be content with what you have. So of those, which one do you think best expresses the theme, the story, or the message, or the lesson from the story? What's being taught? What did this family do with this very, very difficult situation that teaches us a lesson for when we're in a difficult situation? Okay, mark that, and we'll go on to 4. All right, 4. The family in the story demonstrates the idea that people are adaptable. Adaptable means changeable, that they can change. All right, there you go, or willing to change when needed. Which sentence from the passage best shows this idea? All right, A, Annie and Jewel were giggling as they played in the hayloft above him when one of the girls began to wheeze. B. Although it was early morning, the dust storm outside made the small farmhouse dark and dismal. C. Most farmers knew their animals could not survive another winter, so they accepted the offer in exchange for some much-needed cash. And D. He returned home with $16 in his pocket and a little relief knowing that Nellie would be cared for. All right, so in this story, it demonstrates the idea that people are willing to change when needed. Which sentence from the passage shows that? Remember, he had, let's look back here for a minute. See, at the very beginning, you can see here, as Edwin rested his cheek against the side of his cow, Nellie, he could hear the wind whistling through the barn walls. Okay, so he takes care of this cow. He milks this cow. He probably loves the cow, but he had to think about what would help his family the most. So that would get them through this very, very difficult situation. Okay, all right, so let's see. Which one are we on now? Okay, now let's look at 5. A. Based on the passage, how do Ma's feelings about moving change over time? A. She becomes more and more resistant to the idea of moving. B. She grows more comfortable with the idea of moving. C. She likes the idea of moving initially, then comes to dislike it. D. She becomes more confident that the family should not move. All right, so let's take a look at that. Based on the passage, how do Ma's feelings about moving change over time? Okay, so of course at first she didn't want to change, but then as time went on, she slowly has to come around to the idea because she has to help her family. Okay? All right, part B. Which sentence from the passage best shows Ma's changing feelings about moving? All right. A. With a sigh, she took the milk from Edwin, eyeing the familiar dust that she would try to skim off before serving the milk to her family. B. I just don't know if I can leave our home, Ma said, a note of grief in her voice. C. Afterward, Ma went into the yard and stood for a long time by her beloved lilac bush, staring out at the desolate fields. And D. One day, Edwin even caught his mother examining the photograph of the orange grove, smiling for the first time in a long time. All right, so mark your answer there, and we're going to stop there for today. And continue with 6 through 9 tomorrow. All right, see you tomorrow.